Please raise your right hands to be sworn in and then repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Pat Higgins,
Do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Against all
enemies, foreign and domestic.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will
bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California.
And the Constitution of the State of California.
That I take this obligation freely.
That I take this
obligation freely.
Without any mental reservation.
Without
any mental reservation.
Or purpose of evasion.
Or purpose of evasion.
And that I will well and faithfully discharge.
And that I will
well and faithfully discharge.
The duties upon which I am about to enter.
The duties upon which I am about to enter.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'll see you all at 6.
Great, thank you. Congratulations.
Cameo appearance.
Okay, it looks like everybody that was in the waiting room is now in the meeting. Thank you for joining, everybody. I'll turn it over to President Coleman.
Thank you, Adam. So I'd like to call to order the regular session of the Humboldt Bay Harbor Recreation and Conservation District. It is 6 p.m. May we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Marks.
Here.
Commissioner Dale.
Here.
Commissioner Higgins.
Here.
Vice President Doss.
Here.
And President Coleman.
Here. All right. Will you join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? Hopefully we have a nice audio visual to go with it today.
All right, bear with me just for a second here.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
Allegiance to the
to
flag
the republic for which
of
it
the United
stands,
States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well done. That's the best one, President Coleman. I'm impressed. That's awesome.
Ditto.
I'm muted. That was all Mindy and Adam's doing, so thank you very much on that. Okay, maybe we have a report on closed session.
Hold on.
Yeah, there was no reportable action.
To the republic, one nation, under God, indivisible.
All right. So before we move to public comment, I just want to make an announcement. We had a request to move item 11A up to fit people's schedules. And so that's going to happen immediately after public comment before item 9. So now we're going to move into public comment. This portion of the agenda allows the public to speak to the board on various issues not itemized on the agenda. A member of the public may also request that a matter appearing on the consent calendar be pulled and discussed separately. Pursuant to the Brown Act, the board may not take any action on any item that does not appear on the agenda. Each speaker is limited to speak for a period of 3 minutes regarding each item on the agenda. I'm not going to read the rest. I'm just going to ask if there's anyone here with any public comment on items not on the agenda tonight.
I don't see any hands waved or anybody asking
No.
to President Coleman.
Thanks. Yeah, I was just trying to give people some time if they had to unmute or anything. Not seeing any either. So that means we're going to move directly on to item 11A, unfinished business. Introduce amendment number 2, ordinance number 7, an ordinance implementing certain portions of the Humboldt Bay Master Plan.
Yes, staff recommends that the board introduce amendment number 2 to ordinance number 7. And so basically, there's a number of billboards that are in and around Humboldt Bay. And since 1977, when the master plan was originally adopted, there was a prohibition on these types of signs included within the master plan of the Harbor District. When the Humboldt Bay Management Plan was adopted, there was some language included in the Humboldt Bay Management Plan that basically was unclear on whether or not the district was implementing that ordinance or not. And so it called for some clarification of the master plan. And so really the purpose of this item is to clarify the 1977 master plan and outline the procedures for which billboards and other non-permitted signs need to be removed. And so the board has had a couple of different meetings on this, and you asked that we have outside counsel review the draft ordinance. We have Nancy Diamond with us, who we worked with on this ordinance of kind of making some changes. And there was also, the board appointed a subcommittee. And so we worked with President Coleman and Commissioner Higgins and kind of went and teased out a few things with the ordinance. Overall, I'm very happy with the way the ordinance is structured. I believe that it's a well-balanced ordinance and overall meets the objectives of having billboards removed in an orderly fashion. And so we did receive some comments from Humboldt Baykeeper, and there was other comments from the firm representing Outfront Media that were included in the packet. And so staff's recommendation is to introduce ordinance amendment number 2 to ordinance number 7. And as part of the process, if you introduce it, then it would be brought back in your January meeting for adoption.
Thank you. Do any board members have any questions or comments on this?
This is Commissioner Higgins, on the board since 2007. This is a long-standing issue. This is a clarification consistent with our policies all the way back to our inception. And I'm fully in favor of it. And I am grateful for the counsel of Nancy Diamond and for Commissioner Otker crafting what I think is a solution for the situation. And I favor it.
Thank you, Commissioner Higgins. Anybody else?
President Coleman, do we need a motion or is this just an introduction?
I'm not sure. What's the?
We need a motion, and you would have to vote to introduce the ordinance.
I move that we introduce the ordinance.
Second, Higgins.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so we have a motion and a second, and we can still go on to any more discussion from the board.
I would just like a clarification. Through all the language I've looked on it, I didn't see anything that really, I want to know if there's allowable repairs that we can address in this ordinance to, because I would like to make sure that we can't, there's no language in there to repair signs that are down.
Yeah, what there is in the ordinance in the first place is there is an allowance that says that you can change the copy, which basically is the signed copy that's on there, as long as it's a permit that's in good standing. And then there's a process for maintenance and repair. And this is really the trigger to the whole thing, is that if they come in and get a permit from us, then it places conditions on the permit, which says that they have to remove the billboard within 5 years. And they have to put up financial security that there would be funds available in order to remove that. And so it's really, that's part of the enticement, is to get them to come in and voluntarily comply with the permit.
Yeah.
Remarks?
I'm not so sure that I agree with that.
Well, actually, Richard, they come out in 5 years once we adopt this ordinance. And so this kind of is, there is
I know
a terminal.
we've had this discussion, Pat.
All
Thank
right.
you.
If no other commissioners, I have a couple questions too. And just clarification things. And so the first, that there is an amortization period of 5 years that begins, I guess, upon the adoption of this ordinance. But then there's the possibility, or it's left open for the owner to propose a different period. And so my question is, how do they go about that process, and how long, can they wait 4.5 years and then propose a new period? And who is the one who's going to authorize that period and agree to it or not?
So I'll start out, and then Nancy, maybe you can fill in anything with that. And so in the first place is that it's a hard date that, if they come in, I'm trying to remember the exact date that's in here. After 5 years after adoption, if they come in and want a permit after 5 years for adoption, they wouldn't be eligible for a permit because they will already be required to remove that billboard. And then the second component of that is that if you want to come in and I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought on that. I apologize.
I guess the question, if I can clarify the question, it says that the 5-year presumption amortization period is subject to rebuttal by the permit holder. And so I guess I wanted a little more clarification of what that process is of the rebuttal by the permit holder.
Thank you. You saved me on that one. Yes, the 5-year rebuttal period is, so the standard is 5 years. And so when they draft the permit, the expectation is that it would be 5 years to a maximum of 5 years from the date of the ordinance adoption. And so it's a clock that is ticking downwards from the date that you adopt it to that fixed date from when the permit is extended. And so then the applicant could come forward and say, well, that amortization period is not sufficient to meet my needs. And the burden would be on them to give reasons why that amortization period is not acceptable. And I'm going to turn it over to Nancy so she can correct anything that I screwed up on that and give connection to how it relates to state law.
Larry, you did fine. Good evening, members of the board. It's nice to meet you, or those who I've never met before. It's good to see you all. The reason for the 5-year amortization is because under the Outdoor Advertising Act, and forgive me if you all know this because I know you've been studying this for some time, and I have come to your process a little late, but the Outdoor Advertising Act actually identifies what's called compelled removal of the billboard as a taking, and so therefore it's subject to just compensation, which is the process that's provided in the Outdoor Advertising Act is through the eminent domain law. And so because of that, what we've structured is a presumption that 5 years is the time period for you to amortize your capitalization, your capital costs of having the billboard there. And at the end of that, it's going to be valued at zero, so it's no longer a taking. And I think for the most part, as Larry said, that is the standard that's used, I guess, widely throughout the state. And for the most part, the billboards we're talking about here don't have a lot of capital costs in the materials. They probably have some capital costs in the design of the advertising copy, and then whatever the billboard lease investment is, with the underlying property owner. But I think that over that 5-year time period, given that it will start to run, we actually have a 5-year plus time period. We have the end of the time period, January 31 of 2025. So we actually have given, assuming this you introduced tonight, your second reading will be in January. It actually isn't effective until February, so 30 days after its adopted date. So I have to take back what I just said. Slightly under a 5-year amortization schedule. So the process then, getting back to Commissioner Coleman's question, the process is that it's very fact-based, a determination of whether that presumption can be overturned. By having established the presumption, we are allowing the burden to shift to the billboard owner to come forward and say, wait a minute, I want to rebut that. And I therefore have to give you enough evidence to show you that I in fact think it's incorrect. And so it's a slightly greater onus to have to prove something against the ordinance. So we've shifted that, and they have to come forward within the 5-year period before the clock has ended in establishing that. Now, having said that, at the end of the 5-year time period, if they have come forward to challenge it and say that they need more time, it's not clear. We get into a very fact-based determination. We would have to go back and forth. It would be an administrative decision in terms of how your permits in general are administered and what your process is for that. And I honestly don't know what that process is. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with it. And it's entirely possible, if it becomes controversial and contentious, that it would get to the board level and the board would then be providing direction. But again, that's just case determination. I will note that I know that your executive director has been in contact with at least one of the local billboard owners, and he has not raised any objection that's at least before you tonight, or that I've seen in your prior public records. And the letter from the law firm that represents the outdoor media group, they have only claimed concern with the general nature of compensation. And so we've provided for that through this process. So I'm sorry that was a little long-winded, and I may not have gotten to all of your subparts, but I'll turn it back to you.
I think that answered my question. And let me see. And I'm sorry, I have a couple of these. The next one's item D of the ordinance, and it's the maintenance, repair, reconstruction, and this is just a clarification. And so it says, provided that repair or reconstruction is started within 1 year and diligently pursued to completion. And so does that mean after the first year, after this ordinance is passed, that no reconstruction or repairs can happen? Like if a billboard were to fall down 2 years from now, that could not be repaired? Am I reading that correctly or incorrectly?
The the intent that I had when we drafted this was, in particular on the reconstruction, is that it would be 1 year from if something was destroyed by fire or wind, they would basically have 1 year to come forward and do the replacement. And that's, from my experience, that's been sort of the standard time period that typical, you know, if an emergency happens, you have 1 year in order to replace it. And it's just kind of, it takes a while to get insurance claims and other things worked out. And so that, in my experience, why that 1 year time period has been in place.
But that 1 year time frame couldn't be invoked on 4 years and 364 days and kind of, or beyond the 5 years. 5 years is 5 years. And so there's no extension like as kind of through this trapdoor. So, I mean, this isn't a mechanism that could be used to extend beyond the life of what we're going to request and require. And I think also to my fellow commissioners, there is anticipated that there may be some costs on exit compensation for the landowners. So, and I think that's not objectionable, because we need to get access.
I'm not sure if I understood you correctly, Patrick, but I think other than the 5 year amortization period, we're not offering any other monetary fee for removal of these, correct?
No, there's no. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not sure if that's what Commissioner Higgins was implying.
Yeah, you know, I think my understanding was incorrect, so I stand corrected. Thank you.
And then after my next couple questions were asked by a member of the public to me, and so I'm gonna bring them up. And one is that if a billboard is to fall down and needs to be subject to uniform building codes and being built back up.
That is my understanding, but the Harbor District does not regulate the Uniform Building Code. Just like we don't require people to get coastal development permits, we're not in charge of that. The Coastal Commission is in charge of issuing coastal development permits, and the County Building Department is in charge of issuing building departments. And so our ordinance does not require or regulate building permits or coastal development permits any way, shape, or form. Those entities are responsible for implementing their own regulations.
There's a lot of background noise in somebody's microphone. If you're not talking, if you could please mute. Thank you. And then the last one it was questioned to me why that reconstruction would be an administrative permit as opposed to a board permit.
Well, part of it was done is as an enticement to get them to come in, because again, the overarching thing is to get them to voluntarily come in to get a permit, and then they're agreeing to this, that they're going to remove the billboard in this 5 year period. And by them coming in and voluntarily getting the permit, then what happens is it removes all this big question mark of, do they request an alternative amortization period? And so when we drafted this, there was kind of the carrot and the stick. And the carrot is trying to get them to come in and get a permit, which then alleviates all this big question of, are they going to remove the billboard or not? Because if an administrative permit is issued, then the ordinance requires the condition that it be removed by that January 31st, 2025. And they have to put up financial surety to make sure that there's funds in order to remove that. And so it really is the carrot and the stick is the way this is built in.
So that permit application comes upon needing to do any repairs or reconstruction, or will they need to come in and get that permit right away just by having a non-conforming billboard?
No, those are only for maintenance and repairs. Is basically the discussion that I was having this morning with Nancy is that upon adoption of this ordinance, we don't have this all worked out, but most likely the process would be that I will send property owners that are on the bayfront and that have parcels that have billboards noted that the Harbor District has adopted this ordinance, and therefore they have all the requirements that are in this ordinance. So we've placed them on notice at that point. So there won't be any ambiguity. I didn't know this was going to happen. What's going on? Upon adoption of the ordinance, we've notified the property owners that this ordinance is now in effect, and you have to remove the billboard by this date. And if you're doing maintenance or repairs or other things, it has to be done in compliance with this ordinance. And so there's kind of as the carrot and the stick approach that we tried to draft here.
Okay, thank you. I see Richard waving his hand, and that's all that I have. Thank you. And you're muted now, Richard.
My concern about the carrot and the stick is if the stick breaks, I don't want somebody to be able to repair that for that carrot. And that's my whole thing about this is if the billboards are damaged by wind, by nature, by whatever, I don't want to see them, put back together in any shape or form. I've been in enough subcommittees for billboards and been having to talk about billboards for over a decade now. And it's always the same thing. There seems to be a loophole for them to continue on. And so, in any way, shape, or form, I am not going to support anything that allows the structures to stay. That's it for me.
Commissioner Doss.
Hey, thank you. And you know what? Since this has last been on one of our agendas, I want to thank everyone that's put in written reports. And Nancy, thank you. That was a great report earlier. It seems like we're way closer to agreement between all the parties than what we've been in the past, and I really like that. Maybe I'm missing something, but it seems like it's much more squared away. There's a couple points that I'd like to hit, and I'm not quite opposite of what Richard just said, but the last time the billboard, another set of billboards were given a deadline, there was at least one that was cut down with vandalism, and that can screw up that 5-year amortization. So I'd like us in moving forward to somehow build in a little bit more carrot and a little less stick, so that there is proper compensation to this private entity that has been deriving their income for decades and decades, that should that happen, that either the district or it will look at over and above their insurance to match that 5-year amortization, because that's just not right to a private entity. Whether you agree with the philosophy of what they're doing or not doesn't matter. To me, it seems like it's a government overreach. One of the points also that I'd like to bring up is, and you can laugh all you want at me, and I'm being serious about bringing it up, but it's a goofy part of what our bureaucracies have created, is several years ago, I was denied a permit to build on a piece of property that was in the coastal zone, and it had an asphalt parking lot. It was an asphalt parking lot, and I had to drastically reduce permitting for construction because there had been over time water standing on the asphalt parking lot, and it was deemed a wetlands, being an asphalt parking lot. The reverse I see here. I see the billboards being actually habitat. Several birds that I've seen there perched for hunting purposes. So I'm assuming that we've addressed that. I don't see it anywhere, but I would hope that we've addressed things like that. And I think it needs to just be mentioned because it's used in reverse against the public that goes out and permits often on their own private land developments in the reverse. So this is something that it should at least be, you could laugh at me and address it that way, I guess, if you want to, but it has created a habitat. And just like a dock has created habitat with shade and exposure for the sea floor. And then finally, looking at this 5-year window and the removal and requiring financial wherewithal to remove the billboards, can we place in this or consider placing in this agreement that should the owner of the billboard comply with the time frame and eliminate the billboard within the 5-year time frame, that the district will support in all ways possible the removal of the billboard by claiming a demurrer maybe with the Coastal Commission, Fish and Game, Water Quality, and any other entity that is going to be they'll deal with in permitting to remove the billboard. So all of us are very aware that just removing a piling out of the bay requires just short of an act of Congress. And so having an open requirement on this entity to remove a billboard and it's for the benefit of the public, stopping a business activity, and then we're just leaving it wide open for them to just get lambasted by every permitting agency in the future. So I'd like to see some language. It doesn't cost the district anything, but to encourage the billboard being removed within that 5 years. The district will assist where they can for permits and reduce the amount of bureaucracy to remove the billboards. Thanks.
Thank you, Larry. I'm wondering if you have a little more faith in our ability to reduce bureaucracy than I do, but I think that definitely put in the notes to the ordinance. Yeah, I could go on with this discussion for a while, but I'm ready to turn it over to public comment unless any other commissioners have any more comments or questions at this time.
Can I just
I
add
think
what
the
Larry?
cost of billboard removal is absorbable by the district. And so.
We can't really hear you, Patrick.
Okay, I'll defer to Larry. After that is.
I don't know if I think you said you'll defer to Larry. You're not very audible there.
Okay, evidently I've got ear malfunction at my remote location. And so I'd like to turn it to Larry after. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Well, when you, the way this is structured, when you submit your permit, then your permit is to do the repair that you're doing, but your project also involves the removal of the billboard at the end. And so when you're applying for the project and we're evaluating the permit, it's the repair and the removal. You wouldn't have to come back to get a second permit in order to remove the billboard, because that's part of the permit that you would be applying for. It's the condition. You're required to remove the billboard. And then there would be any standard conditions of approval or other things that would be included in the permit. And so that's the streamlining thing of this whole thing. Because in my opinion, it really is the question is that if you don't have people come in to get a permit and put these conditions, then what are you going to have? These dilapidated structures that are there, sitting out there, and who's going to remove them? Because like what Commissioner Doss said, heavens forbid, it would take you more than 5 years to get the permit to remove the things. And who's going to pay for all of that? Because the property owner isn't going to be jumping up and down to want to pay for all these permits. That's kind of is, you know, from my perspective, you have to look at this holistically. Assuming in 5 years, how is the billboard going to be removed? And do we set up a process that the whole thing is set up so that the removal is built into the same time as you're doing the repairs?
I like that. I think that's smart. Is it possible to grant permit for that would last 5 years, that the other entities won't jump in and try to harm them or increase the cost?
We don't control the Coastal Commission. And so one of the comments is that they will likely be required to get a Coastal Commission permit as well. And so we only issue our own permits. We can't control what the Coastal Commission will require or what will be included in the building permit. Although the building permit is not a discretionary permit, it would only be for the installation.
Here's my question with this, Larry, that I think I was trying to get at before, and this kind of brought up again, is so if one of these, the owner of a billboard is not doing any repairs over the next 5 years, so they're not coming in for a reconstruction or a repair permit. So at that point, they're putting up no money for the removal, and they're not signing anything saying that they agree with this period. So what sort of stick do we retain for that? I mean, they're still under the same 5-year period, correct?
They are still under that 5-year period, and I'm going to slightly defer to Nancy on this. But at that point, is then they're put on notice that they're in violation of Ordinance number 7, and it needs to be removed. And then we would need to initiate enforcement action and take those processes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now with this, I guess what I'd like to do is first, if there's anyone from the public who'd like to make comment on this, first identify yourself. I'll make a note and then I'll call you one at a time to make public comment.
Kim Sawatsky, I'm identifying myself.
Thank you, Mr. Slotsky. Is there anyone else who'd like to comment on?
Yeah, hi, Jennifer Kraut.
Chairman Coleman, Scott Fraser.
Okay, anyone else? I have the 3. All right, Mr. Slotsky, you're up.
Let's make a little public record here. I don't own any billboards, but I feel that it should be mentioned that the testimony of your director was that you have not notified any of the landowners who are going to be affected till after you're passing an ordinance. I believe you have a duty to notify those affected by this ordinance prior to moving forward, so I object to you moving forward in any way, shape, or form until you've done proper notification. That's just fair and equitable, and I can't believe that's not been done. The testimony also has been that it would take 5 years to get a permit to remove those billboards, and yet the same permits would be required to make repairs on them, most likely, and yet you're saying that somebody only has 1 year to make those repairs. So I think that's going to kind of shoot down that part of your ordinance here. I believe this is arbitrary and capricious. I don't think that you can enforce this. I don't think you're crossing your T's and you're dotting your I's. I would make testimony that from what I've seen, the value of a billboard at the end of 5 years, if it's able to be repaired, is equal to what it is now. And I'm guessing the Harbor District might come up with some really good lawyers, and you might be paying the $500,000 or $250,000 for what I would refer to as a blackmailed delayed taking. You're basically blackmailing into somebody, assigning something to get a permit to fix it, and then you're going to go ahead and after this time take the value, which may be $500,000. I don't know the value. So highly recommend you get appraisals of what your potential taking might be. Your competent counsel did classify this as a form of taking, and it seems like you're trying to backdoor these things. I would cross your T's and dot your I's in this case. Otherwise, the district could be facing untold costs for each of those billboards, and you're dealing with some very sharp lawyers, and I'm sure they're covering their tail. But that's my perception. Not that I support the billboards out there, but I do support, and I would really like to reiterate all the testimony that your Commissioner Doss made on this matter. I highly caution you not to engage in this activity, no matter how noble it may be, no matter how deep your pocket may be. You may find that you're going to exceed the limits. And I don't know what your liability insurance is for this either. So those are some questions. I would hesitate to move forward on this until you get all of those questions, determinations made by Nancy Diamond and other people who are experts in the field who specifically deal with the specific law. I believe Nancy's quite capable. On the other hand, I think you're putting yourself out to a possible extremely large lawsuit or extremely large losses when it comes time at the end of this 5-year blackmailed taking. So that's my opinion. There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Sawatsky. Jennifer Colt.
Hey there. I didn't know I could turn myself upside down. That was pretty weird. Let's try it again. Hey, I might say that. Hi, my name is Jennifer Colt with Humboldt Baykeeper, and I guess I wasn't going to talk about this, but I'm not sure if the previous speaker knows that Humboldt County is now the property owner where those billboards are standing because they paid over $600,000 to purchase the property. So that might be consideration. I hope you got the comments. I sent a brief comment letter this afternoon. I apologize for the lateness of that, but you know, time's short. Some of the things that we raised have been addressed, but I'll just go in order here. First of all, we can understand the reasons for a 5-year amortization period, and we think that's more than reasonable given how many years these billboards have been standing on that property and being very profitable. So 5 years seems plenty, and we ask that you not have the possibility of an extension. The second one is a really simple fix, which is the maintenance, repair, and reconstruction should be started within 6 months, which is what's required by the Outdoor Advertising Act. Although we would agree with Commissioner Marks that damaged or destroyed, fully destroyed billboards should simply not be allowed to be rebuilt, period. Number 3, these billboards are by definition in environmentally sensitive habitat areas, and so the Coastal Commission should be notified when someone comes in and applies for a permit from the Harbor District. Number 4 is regarding the compliance with UBC standards to protect public safety, which is an important mission of the Harbor District. And in 2005, indeed, a Harbor District, a billboard in the jurisdiction of your commission, your district, did indeed get blown over onto the highway and posed a public health and safety hazard. So the UBC standards are really important, and it's not clear to me how this permit kicks into a county building permit where the UBC standards would be required. And then lastly, the administrative permit process in the draft ordinance, it says that it would be done in accordance with ordinance number 14. And I was a little confused because I don't think that ordinance is what governs administrative permits, but in either case, those permits are limited to 1 year. So it's a little bit confusing to understand how you would have a permit for as long as 5 years. Would they have to be coming in and getting a permit renewal every year? So that's just my inexperience with your administrative process, since it's not part of the public process. So I do want to say that Humboldt Baykeeper supports the district at very long last, actually enforcing this very old law, that policy from 1976. it's about time, and we really look forward to the orderly removal of the billboards and seeing all the billboards removed from Humboldt Bay Tideland. So thank you.
Thank you. And Scott Fraser.
Thank you, Commissioner Chairman Coleman. I'd like to thank you and staff for the work you've done on this topic. I believe that it's good progress, and I support the intent of this agenda item and the motion that was made. I also want to endorse and support the positions that Jen Calt has just identified as Baykeeper's position on this topic. There's one item that I think was missing in the discussion amongst the commissioners. And that is, I believe you were informed previously by a Caltrans representative that each of these remaining billboard landowners has declined to accept an offer from a public agency to purchase them at market value. So for them to then be worried about losing value and tied up in permits to take them down is an oxymoron. They have an out. They've been offered to sell those billboards to Caltrans, is my understanding. So I don't think you need to worry too much about the private landowners, but what you're doing is entirely effective and appropriate, and I thank you for that.
Thank you. And I'll just say one more time, is there any public that I missed who wanted to make a comment on this before I move it back to the board?
I know Uri raised his hand. He's waiting to comment. Uri, are you there?
Trying to unmute here.
Okay, we can hear you now.
Can you hear me? Okay, great. Thanks. So a couple of things. What I'm not quite understanding is, has the county been informed that this ordinance is on the table? I know when they bought that property, they were counting on that revenue stream. So even if, I think you got to inform them before this goes on, because, that was a revenue stream they're counting on for the Bay Trail. The other part is, what I don't really understand is, if you're expecting them to take the billboards down in 5 years, if they come in for that permit, will they be able to take them down without the headaches of going into wetland ESHAs and making the disturbances that would be there? Because if you're the only one granting them a permit to repair and remove, is that going to be enough in 5 years? And I can't say I've ever heard of a permit being granted for 5 years from now for doing something. So those are my comments. That's about it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We do have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any final conversation, comments from the board? I would, just moving on one comment from the public, wonder if we should make the amendment from the 1 year to get a permit to 6 months, if that's under the advertising code. Do you know, Nancy, is that in compliance with the outdoor advertising?
I haven't had a chance to actually check, but I have no reason to think they're misrepresenting it. They do cite the regulatory rule for the state law as 6 months. And I'm sorry, I have not had a chance to look at that. I could try and find it right now to confirm, but again, I have no reason to mistrust that as being misrepresented.
And so again, this is, we'd be moving to accept the first reading. It would have to come back to us next month for approval, but if we made any substantive changes to the ordinance in that time, it would have to go through that same 2-month process. In my opinion, this is even if it's 6 months or 1 year, it's the right step in moving towards getting these things removed. It's not maybe, there might be some potential openings that people can conjecture are in there, but I think this is really within what we're capable within our jurisdiction. I think this is the next right step to get these removed and in a fair and legal manner. So I'm good with the ordinance, but I would again entertain changing that from 1 year to 6 months if anybody wants to make that motion.
I think Greg and I are okay with that.
I'm okay with the motion as it stands.
Well, I guess, so we have a motion. Now I'm confused. So I guess the original person who made the motion said they were okay with it, but the second wasn't. So I guess.
I think, Stephen, that if there's an error in the language in terms of the duration as defined by Jennifer Galt, I think it's within Nancy Diamond's discretion to make minor adjustments. No, it's not. All right. Kent, you're not recognized.
Yeah.
But at any rate, I defer to the person who made the motion personally in this matter, so we can move forward and pass it as it was forth.
Yeah, okay, so the motion was originally from Commissioner Dale. Okay, so I guess we have the original motion and second on the floor. Could we have a roll call vote on it then?
Commissioner Dale,
Yes.
Commissioner Higgins,
Yes.
Commissioner Marks,
No.
Commissioner Doss,
Yes.
and President Coleman.
Yes. All right, so that passes. So again, that's going to come back again next month. Thank you very much to staff and to Council Nancy Diamond for your hard work on this. And now I have to catch my order again. I guess we're at the consent calendar. So can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion. We accept the consent calendar.
I'll second that.
I would recommend that you, we have the district council to give a report on the financial report, and I'd ask that you pull the financial report so he could give you a brief report, because that was requested of the board previously.
Okay, so that'll be item C. So could you amend the motion for just items A and B?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, motion for consent calendar, items A and B. Can we have a vote?
Commissioner Dale,
Yes.
Commissioner Marks,
Yes.
Commissioner Higgins,
Yes.
Vice President Doss,
Yes.
and President Coleman.
Yes, so it's my understanding now that the financial reports will be discussed in the district treasurer's report, so we'll just move right on to reports.
No.
Am I correct, or do we?
No, we received a report from the district treasurer, and he'll talk about the financial reports.
Okay, so we're gonna do the financial reports now.
That's correct. Mark, could you just give the board just a brief update of the district's finances and entertain any questions the board might have?
Okay. Let's see. Yeah, so I was just going to talk a few points on each one of those reports that you have there this month. So I was going to start with the cash flow analysis just to highlight a couple things there. So obviously that report is showing cash of $629,000. That's a decrease of about $92,000 from the prior month. And the schedule is designed to show at the top, where our cash is, and then show the income and expenditures for the month, and then any significant expenditures or income at the bottom. And essentially, the larger items occurring during the month essentially offset each other. There wasn't anything really unusual. One thing I was going to mention is that the fact that we have a declining balance one of the reasons for that, it points out the fact that our property taxes are about 1/3 of our income, and those come in 2 lump sums, one in December and one in April. And after that, we're essentially drawing down those on those reserves as needed from the tax income. And as of October 31st, we actually have essentially used those tax revenues from the last April disbursement, from the county. The good news is that as of today, December 10th is the day when we get our December taxes. I don't have an actual report from the county on that, but that is the day that it's credited to our account, and I expect it to be about $575,000 in our cash and county treasury today. Offsetting that is a payment that's due on January 1st for our bond and loan of $200,000. So that remaining balance is what will be our funds available for general operations moving forward from that point. So, it shows that we have $629,000 in cash. One thing that we're trying to do though is keep the balance in the tariff account of about $500,000. We're trying to keep that available for future dredging projects. So that difference, it sometimes is made a challenge for our cash flow. Our staff has to watch the cash flow as our tax money is used throughout the year. So we'll have the additional reserves in place starting today. But I'm looking forward to when we can continue to build our reserves, so we don't even have to worry about that in the future. So I was going to talk about the balance sheet, a couple points there. There's other than the cash that we just talked about, there's no real significant changes, for this month. But I did just want to point out a few things just to make sure you understand some of the things that you're looking at there on the balance sheet. There's in the long-term liabilities, there's a net pension liability of $1,033,000. That's on page 2 of the balance sheet. It's about halfway down. That $1 million is the district's portion of the statewide pension liability. That's something that gets adjusted every year. So that balance there is what is showing as the June 30th, 2020 balance. That's the updated balance for the last fiscal year end. And if you look, there's a couple other things related to that. There's deferred inflows and outflows. Deferred inflow is in the long-term liability. So I just wanted to point that out. If you're wondering what those are, the deferred inflow from PERS, deferred outflow from PERS, those are just adjustments that come into play at the end of each year to bring in the state's portion. And every government in the state has to recognize their portion of that, which is statewide, it's $29 billion. So that's our portion. There is also in long-term liability, the OPEB liability, the OPEB, that's the other post-employment benefits, which is the retiree health benefits. That's the computed amount, the computed long-term liability, actuarially determined that we hire the actuary to compute that amount. And that balance of $342,000 is the computed balance over the entire essentially the entire time that any eligible employee will still be taking advantage of those benefits. Just a couple comments on the profit and loss statement. That's the last couple pages of your reports. One thing, rent income, that's on page 1 of the profit and loss. It's at $655,000, and just to point, that's about a $75,000 increase over the prior year. Then on the next page, personnel expenses, that's our wages and benefits. That's at $457,000, which is only about $7,000 more than the prior year. And then the bottom line of all of this is a net income of $79,000 and through October 31st. So that's just a real quick overview. And one thing when we're at profit and loss, just so you realize it does not include depreciation expense. It's essentially the modified cash basis way of looking at the district's finances. And maybe just one last quick point, the audit is still in progress, but I think we're hoping that it can be finalized by the end of December is the goal. So we'll see. I think it's moving along. So we're pretty close to having that finalized. So that's all that I had at this point. If anybody had any questions, I could try to answer them or look into those and get back to you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Any questions from the board?
Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.
All right, hearing none. Any questions from the public or comments?
Scott Frazier, question through the chair.
Yes, go ahead, Scott.
Appreciate the update and looking at your financial conditions. But in agenda item 11B, the schedule for repayment of the Coast Seafood loan, there were quite a few interesting items. And I noted a $199,000 payment made December 1st of last year. I'd like to know which account those funds came from and whether that's reflected in the profit loss statement that was adopted at the end of the year or in the last audit, or how would we track that payment going forward?
That payment, and Larry, I believe that is the balance that Coast Seafood owes us, right? That's going to be applied to that. So that was not actually, and it actually, it was not an actual cash transaction.
It was a credit.
And, that hasn't been, and at this point, that has not been reflected through the June 30th, and then this account October. So I believe when this agreement is finalized, that's when I would be recording that adjustment. So at this point, it has not been reflected, and it's not an actual cash outlay, but it's applying those receivables to the loan balance.
Chairman Coleman, in that case, I'd like you to review how that's labeled in the agenda item 11B, because it appeared to be a payment column notation. And if it's not in the correct date or in the right actual description, be nice to correct that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And we can address that when that agenda item comes up. Anything else on this item?
This is Ken Sawatsky. May I make comment?
Go ahead, Mr. Sawatsky.
Of course, I think it was noted that you have obligations of $1.3 million outstanding for your PERS and your medical programs there. I was curious if you have set asides for that in some specific account to cover that, or are those just things that are going to come up and bite you later? So I don't know how that's done on your books there. The other comment I did have to make, I think we already need to have the back of our auditor controller. Karen Paz is underfunded and understaffed by the county, and it was made mention that our taxes are paid on the 10th here, which I paid mine yesterday, a rather large sum to the county here. But those funds may be not forthcoming unless you have enough people in those departments. And I believe that would have to be cut to auditor controller. Correct me if I'm wrong. But to make timely payments to you folks. So I really hope that all of us will get a hold of the supervisors and specifically ask Rex Bone in Virginia and the rest of those people there, and the CEO of the county to fund and staff those so that you guys can get your checks and your bookkeeping in a timely manner. A bunch of people were complaining about not having payments. I don't know whether the Harbor District did, but the biggest thing we can do is get behind our auditor controller to make sure those can be made for you. It's just common sense. I do have some questions a little bit, and I will go ahead and have the same question that Mr. Fraser had there regarding some of the accounting on that. Now, that would be some form of double entry, should be listed both as income and an expense, not just a countering of an obligation. That would have to track somewhere. And so you should have an asset in there of unpaid money coming from Coast. And then, of course, you're going to have a potential liability for the amount, I guess, that's the interest. So I don't know how that's being reflected in your books, but those things as far as transparency, correct accounting procedures, are really important so we can understand the flow of the cash and how it works for you guys. So thank you for the opportunity to speak with my semi-accountant hat on at the time. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Okay. Any more members of the public wish to speak on this topic? All right. Thank you very much for your report and your service to the district. I was down in the reports, and now I need to get back up here to see what our next item is.
We would do a motion to approve the financial reports, consent item number C.
Thank you, Larry. Yep, you're right. So I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve the financial reports.
I'll second.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Dale,
Yes.
Commissioner Marks,
Yes.
Commissioner Higgins,
Yes.
Commissioner Doss,
Yes.
and President Coleman.
Yes. All right, moving on to communication reports and correspondence received. We still have a number of items on the agenda, so if we could make these brief, I'll ask.
Yeah, we're just working on maintenance projects. We do not have any reports to give tonight. If the board has any questions, we'd be happy to respond to those. Thank you.
Thank you. Then moving on to, like I said, that was staff reports. We have a district council report. We already had the treasurer report.
No report tonight.
Commissioner and committee reports. I'll go by who I see on the Zoom. Larry Doss.
No, really not much to report. Most of it we've already talked about. Lots of interaction about what's on our agenda tonight, and we'll just continue to talk about that as we go.
Thank you, Commissioner Dale.
Not much to say other than things we've talked about with Shelter Cove, but we are working through some issues in Shelter Cove, and hopefully that's going to be for the betterment of the Cove and all of us.
Yep, I hope so too. Thank you, Commissioner Marks.
No report.
And Commissioner Higgins.
I don't trust my audio. I'm going to pass.
All right. No report from me as well. Do we have any correspondence received that hasn't been reported on specific topic?
No.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Moving on to item 11B. Consider approving the First Amendment to limited obligation note and loan documents with Coast Seafoods.
So staff would recommend that you approve the First Amendment to this note. I included in the staff report, I included, kind of a detailed history of this. I thought it was important to document, how the district ended up getting this debt, and then what the debt has resulted in. And basically, it was a big move that the Harbor District took when they acquired the property. There was a lot of liabilities dealing with the former pulp mill, and that this 1.25 line of credit from Coast Seafood enabled us to leverage over $10 million from the EPA and a significant amount of investment. And it's really starting to pay off at this point. A couple of things I wanted to point out. It's been brought up that attachment A, there's an amortization table. A couple of things on that. If you look in the upper right-hand corner of that, it says that the interest rate is 4.5%. That's on there. But if you look at the agreement, it's actually 4.75 is the interest rate between, and that's the interest rate between May 1st, 2018 through May 30th of 2020. And then what happens per the agreement is the interest rate was negotiated to be based upon the prime rate. And so from March 30th of 2020, the interest rate has actually gone down to 3.25%. And so the current interest rate that the Harbor District has been paying since March 30th, 2020 to the current is actually 3.25. And so this table that is in here is meant to be an example, and it's not an exact amortization table. I want to really point that out for the public, but it's pretty darn close. I mean, these are relatively minor adjustments. Then the second thing, it was brought up that there's $199,953, what's classified on that table as being extra payment. Well, that correlates within the agreement to section 2.1, and that's the outstanding rents that Coast Seafood had applied to, owed the Harbor District as of November 30th, 2019. Since November 30th of 2019, they've been current in their rent. And in essence, I won't say it was a dispute, but the Harbor District, they wanted the Harbor District to make payments on their loan. And so they were withholding lease payments on us. And so we've agreed that they will credit the full amount of all the outstanding lease payments that they owed us up through that November 30th, 2019. And they've been current since that time period. They've been current with all their lease payments, and the Harbor District has been current with all the payments that are outlined in the agreement that are in section 1 of Exhibit A. And so also as part of this agreement, and this is an important thing, both the Harbor District and Coast Seafood agreed that we would not charge each other any late fees or any penalties or anything that's associated with the note. This is just a simple, straightforward transaction where it is 4.75% interest from May 1st, 2018 through March 30th, 2020. And then the interest drops down to prime. And then the last point that I want to bring up in section 5, there are specific additional principal paydowns that are laid out in that agreement. And so January of each year, we make a $40,000 one-time payment in January of each year. And we coincide that just because Mark Witzel had mentioned that we get the tax payments in December, and then we would make that 40,000 lump sum payment when our cash flow is at the full. Then in section 5, it's laid out that the Harbor District has these lease agreements that we have that have one-time payments that are in there. And we signed an agreement with RTI, and the first payment of $200,000 from the RTI lease agreement would go towards the acquisition of the beach property. And then the second $425,000 would go towards the payment of this Coast Seafood loan. Now we are anticipating that $425,000 payment will be received sometime in the summer of 2021. And so when we receive that $425 payment from RTI, that payment will be made to Coast Seafood, and that will draw down the loan. if we continue to go, and these numbers aren't in here, what it shows is that if we make that $425,000 and then we continue to make the $13,000 a month payment as laid out, then this note would be paid in full in approximately January of 2022, right? Approximately 1 year from now. There's another section in here because within the Nordic Aqua Farms agreement, it says that they're going to pay us approximately $500,000 for the use of the substation. And so when the Harbor District receives a lump sum payment from either Coast Seafood or, either RTI or the Nordic Aqua Farms, then it would be used to pay down these notes ahead of time. And so based upon the lease agreement, we have until April 30th of 2023 to make the full payments on this loan during the amortization period. What we're anticipating is going to happen is that in approximately July, we're going to get the $425,000 payment from the RTI lease. That will go to pay down the loan. And then most likely in about September or towards the end of 2021, we'll receive payments from Nordic on those leases. And so in either occurrence, we're anticipating that this loan will be paid off in full by approximately January of 2022. But we're guaranteeing that we will make the balloon payments of any outstanding balance by April 30th of 2023. And so, there's been a lot of negotiations that have gone on over time. We had this agreement negotiated before COVID hit, and the intention was to place this on the agenda. I believe it was in March when this was originally supposed to have been on the agenda, but the Harbor District and Coast both had a whole bunch of things going on. And we both agreed that we were going to set this aside so that we could concentrate on COVID activities. And then as soon as we got the RTI lease agreement executed, we immediately contacted Coast. And this has been on the accelerated pathway to get this lease or note amendment finalized. So staff recommends that the board approve amendment number 1 to the note.
Thank you very much.
I'll make that motion, Stephen.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments from the board? All right, I just want to say I know how long this negotiation has been going on for, and I think it's what's best for the district, and I'm impressed with the way this turned out. So I say we get it signed as quickly as we can before anybody else retires or any lawyers change. So moving on to any questions or comments from the public.
Stephen, am I still unmuted or not? Can't hear.
You are.
Make some sort of smart comment, but no, you're unmuted. Go ahead, Mr. Kent.
So, yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. That's kind of my attitude on that one. My question, I think, and a question you should be asking your staff, and I would appreciate it being asked of staff, was what is the date that the lien against the property or whatever it amounts to be from the $10 million or whatever we got from the powers that be to facilitate this. My understanding that lien may be up sometime in the not too distant future. And of course, then you would have an asset you could borrow against in case to make these obligations. So I think that's an extremely relevant question that you ought to be aware of as far as your exit strategy should your other one or two things fail on this. So I'd appreciate a date if we could. If it can't be provided now, possibly first thing next meeting, as far as when that EPA expenditure no longer encumbers the property. So that's my main question. And of course, I always have angst because I think we're getting 25 cents on the dollar probably for what we're getting as far as money for that lease. It was like $192,000. Anyway, I'll continue to have my angst regarding that one. Could be a cash cow, but it hasn't been. And but that question I think is really relevant. The public would like to know your your potential for refinancing that property to pay off that loan. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the public? All right, hearing none. Larry, do you happen to know that date when the EPA lien encumbrance is up?
I do, is that the Humboldt Bay Development Association, met at the last meeting, and then there's two main components, and there really is the loan agreement that's dealing with the new market tax credits. And we met with the auditors, and it's a loan of approximately $7 million will be forgiven in March of 2023 is the magic date on that. And then the EPA loan, we're reviewing the notes with the EPA loan right now. And I couldn't find the exact forgiveness clause on there, but it was keyed with the equipment was 7 years on that. And that note was issued in 2016, was when, I believe it was January of 2016. And so then 7 years from that date, which would be 2023. And so 2023 is when all of these things are coming into play. The new market tax credit notes should be forgiven. The EPA should be taken off of the books, and the Coast Seafood note would be fully paid for well before that time period, as long as everything stays on track. And so we're closely monitoring those dates, and the EPA note is the next one that's on our list.
All right, thank you. So any further conversation from the board, or we'll bring it, we have a motion and a second on the floor.
Hey,
Stephen, I've got a Zoom thing, and that is 442-4450 has been a provider of background information and has never been on mute. And they're the lowest one on the screen. And so it would be great if they turned it on mute so that there isn't clutter to the sound of this meeting. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Richard, were you saying something?
Yeah, before I was interrupted by Pat, I just wanted to comment that this was the best dollars that the Harbor District ever spent. I know there's a lot of people who weren't really for us moving this direction. And probably if they knew how much money we were actually able to get with the new market tax credits and the improvements we got to do with that. At that time, our director, Larry Otker, was on the Humboldt Development Association board, which Patrick Higgins is on currently. And yeah, once we unroll that out and clear all the debts of this Harbor District in 2023, we're going to be a really well financed agency that, yes, took a lot of risks, but we've done a lot of good, and I think we got good things happening in the future. Think good, Kent. Think good.
Thank
good
you,
karma.
Marks. And actually, I have to second that. And I wasn't on the board when the board made that decision, but I supported it wholeheartedly and still do. And not only it's turning into, it's going to be a financial windfall for the district and going over many decades. So it's going to be a few years of pain and many decades of financial windfall. But it also, you can't understate how it saved the harbor and the bay from a really strong potential of just an environmental catastrophe by the Harbor District stepping in and making that decision and moving quickly. And then I also have to ask Commissioner Dale if that's one of those mysterious obelisks or monoliths that we keep hearing about in the news coming out of your head.
Yes, it is.
I'll move. Okay, I don't want to be associated with mysterious monoliths.
Oh, no, okay, that was just a window pane. I thought you had a background of like the Washington Monument there or something. I must be getting giddy. Okay, so we have a motion.
I wish I was in Washington DC, but I'm not.
Yeah, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Higgins,
Yes.
Commissioner Doss,
Yes.
Commissioner Marks,
Yes.
Commissioner Dale,
Yes.
and President Coleman.
Yes. Moving on to item 12, new business A, extension of permit number 1405 for invasive Spartina eradication and native salt marsh restoration.
Cover that one. I'm going to share my screen here.
Are you going to provide a report, Adam?
I don't see anything, Adam.
I like those fish.
Really? You don't see anything? You don't see my screen?
Now I do.
See your screen
now.
I can't see
Saw your
my screen.
aquarium there for a second.
Believe it or not. Hold on. I got a technical issue. I'm doing it. Okay. So staff is asking the board to renew a permit that we've issued to ourselves. This is for the Spartina eradication and native salt marsh restoration program. Just as a little background, I just have this one slide. It'll be fairly quick. And we talked about Spartina at the last meeting too, with regards to the upcoming project on Tuluwah Island. But just as background, over 90% of the bay's salt marsh habitat has been converted to other habitats, and the limited amount of salt marsh habitat left, much of it has been invaded by the non-native plant species Spartina densiflora, reducing the biodiversity there. There's been a West Coast-wide effort to eradicate Spartina. About 8 years ago, the district put some work in with the State Coastal Conservancy to sort of streamline the permitting and make it easier for Spartina control efforts to occur, and to make the efforts more coordinated. As part of that, the district got a permit from the Coastal Commission that can be used throughout the bay, as well as in Eel River and Mad River estuaries. Different entities work under the Harbor District throughout the bay from the Coastal Commission. We also adopted a program environmental impact report for the program. The State Coastal Conservancy is the lead agency on that. And then we also issued ourselves permit 1505, allowing us and other entities that want to operate under a permit to do so. Again, making it so each individual Spartina project doesn't have to go through its own individual permitting process. The individual projects do have to submit to us, and we submit to the Coastal Commission what's called site-specific Spartina eradication plans, which detail some of the project-specific stuff like minimizing impacts to bioresources, erosion, addressing cultural resources, and so forth. But the permitting's already done. Our permits expire annually, so we're asking that the board extend this permit for another year from December 18th to 2020 to December 17th, 2021. We're also asking if the board would consider allowing the executive director to make future extensions on this permit, so that they don't have to, so it doesn't have to keep coming back to the board. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
I will make a motion that we approve the extension of permit 14-05 from December 18th, blah, blah, blah.
We have a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion from the board?
I hate Spartina.
I have a question, Commissioner Coleman, President Coleman. So Adam, this still does not allow the use of herbicides, right? It's all still manual?
No, herbicides are potentially allowed. They haven't been used. Again, if that turned out to be the ideal method, then it could be proposed, but then it'd be considered on a project by project basis at the staff level by both Harbor District staff and Coastal Commission staff.
Okay.
This is Commissioner Higgins. And I definitely am not in favor of the use of herbicides.
Patrick, I think Greg was still talking, but
Well, I'll channel Patrick here because his audio is bad. I agree with Patrick, and I also, I know Adam and I've talked about this ad nauseum, but there is additional process that is in place. You can't just go use herbicides without going through additional process. Notification, commission hearing, commission could be on a staff report, or I mean, a consent calendar, but there's still going to be notifications if they're going to use herbicides. Correct?
Yeah, the board has requested from staff in the past that before we approve a site-specific control plan that involves herbicide, that we bring it to the board for discussion. So we would do that.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Pat, did you want to add to that, or did you have anything else to say?
No, that was exactly my sentiment, and my concern was reflected by Greg.
So just for clarity, so do the site permits come before the board, or is that an administrative permit?
They're not permits. They do not come before the board. They're a requirement actually of the coastal development permit and of the EIR. So the way that process is, district staff will review those, and then we will send them to coastal commission staff, and then coastal commission staff will approve them at the staff level. Again, they're not a permit. They're a condition that can be approved at the staff level by coastal commission. And because it's our permit, we have to agree with it also. So, even if it's another entity that's going to conduct the work, and this hasn't always been the case in the past, but we've switched it so that it's the case now. If there's another entity that's going to conduct the work under our permit, they'll submit to us the site-specific eradication plan. District staff will, I'm repeating myself, but again, we'll review it. Once we're comfortable with it, we'll forward it to coastal commission for approval. No board action by anybody, except there is action. The water board issues a waiver for each specific project. Sorry.
So, Adam, there seems like funding has kind of dried up for Spartina eradication. You see a resurgence of that, or are we?
Well,
the Caltrans fund.
Yeah, it's interesting. For quite a few years, all the Spartina control work was being done through grant funds, both federal and state grant funds. I agree, we're not seeing much of that at all now. However, the agencies are now accepting Spartina control as mitigation for different types of projects. We've seen that recently with the PG&E project, the gas pipeline decommissioning project that the board approved the permit for. And then, of course, what we discussed at our last board meeting with regards to the large effort that's going to happen on Tuluwah Island as mitigation for the safety corridor project. And the PG&E project was somewhat smaller. They didn't require an endowment, but interestingly and importantly, I think, the Tuluwah project, Caltrans is going to put up a non-wasting endowment, and then the interest off of that will be used to ensure that Spartina is removed from the island essentially in perpetuity. Again, it's a non-wasting endowment. So, that's never happened with any of these grants. So one of the big challenges of the Spartina control program has been, people get a grant for 5 years or whatever, and they do really good for those 5 years, but then there's not necessarily funding to keep it up. And so we've been always scratching to do that maintenance, those maintenance efforts. But with these new mitigation dollars requiring endowments, that's theoretically taken care of.
Thank you. Anything else from the board before I bring it to the public? All right, do we have any members of the public wishing to comment on this?
Yes, this is Uri Driscoll. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I've spent an inordinate amount of time with Adam on this, trying to bring up some of the issues. I'm really surprised, Adam, that you didn't discuss any of that in your presentation. First thing, I mean, I sent you all something, I don't know whether you read them or not, but there's a white paper and some of my concerns. So there's been obvious lack of monitoring that was required with the previous projects under this Harbor District permit. So I don't see how you can continue supporting projects with the lack of data and monitoring reports. That just seems like very irresponsible. You can't say you have a successful project unless all of that has been done, completed, reviewed in a transparent manner, which obviously that has not taken place. Sending new RFPs out to some of these agencies and nonprofits, whatever they are, that are doing the work that have not completed previous permit obligations, again, is extremely irresponsible. The white paper that was completed in 2019 on the salt marsh habitats around the bay raised some flags around the Spartina removal projects and the erosions that were taking place. Again, that has not been adequately addressed. And the 2019, this white paper was the latest of the reports that were brought addressing any of this. And it also, that report, the white paper rather, addressed the sediment reuse plan, which I think is a very valuable thing to be looking at. And I think that could solve a lot of the dredging issues and all that. So until that is complete, tearing up a plant that may be very valuable in dispersing some of these sediments, I think is, again, extremely short-sighted. Let me see. You know, we're told that many people, you know, like to remove the Spartina, but you should know that there are a lot of people that really question this practice. You know, one of the things that I think needs to be understood is that the Spartina densiflora is rather unique to Humboldt Bay. It is not the same Spartina that was introduced to the San Francisco Bay for shoreline protections. It was in federal documents, BLM documents, considered a native plant up until 2003. And for some reason, it then became speculated that it was brought in from sailing ships in the 1870s, I think it was. Somehow that came up, and it's speculated. So we may be actually trying to eradicate a plant that may have been native to this place all along. There's a lot of talk we hear about protecting our salt marshes and our wetlands, and the erosion that is taking place through these projects is not being addressed. Has been brought up by numerous people in the community and that white paper. So it's not like I'm the only one that's bringing up some of these issues. And you as a harbor district have a responsibility to these tidelands and protecting the shorelines. So I think you really need to take this a little bit more seriously. And this idea of just having it an administrative process with no public review or no transparency and no even following up on the monitoring is extremely irresponsible. So that's all my comments for today. I really hope that this is rethought and we can actually see what the impacts of these projects are. The only report, the only study that's referenced in this permit is a 2011 permit, and that is, you know, early on in any of these projects and not having really seen the detriments. I wanted one more point. I fully, strongly support, the non-use of herbicides and a real strong look at how these projects are conducted. But we cannot be putting herbicides in the bay, and this permit should not be forwarded with that with that possibility at all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have any more comments from the public?
Stephen, am I unmuted? This is Kent Sawatsky.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I see no reason to even make anybody think they could use the herbicides, and that should be dropped from this under any not permitted period. I mean, that to me is not correct thinking in the process. I don't know about all the specifics that Uri Driscoll brought up there. I'm not an expert in all that, so I'm not going to make comment on that. I think he raised some concerns that might be beneficial to address. I think that you folks should not turn this over to administration. I think it's something that should be yearly reviewed, just as you've been. That seems to be working, and I hate to have it come back forward to you once a year. But I think because of changing times and perceptions, and again having an antiquated use of herbicide in there, that needs to be brought forward at least this year, next year, and amended. That's my opinion regarding it. I think you have a public consensus. That's just not the thing to even consider. I did have a question for you regarding the Tulawatt thing that Caltrans is doing. Since that's a government project or Caltrans related, I assume they have to pay Davis-Bacon or certified wage as far as doing that. And I don't know, I guess they would be administering who gets the bids. Anytime you have a chance, I don't know if you're not dealing with the funding anymore. I think you used to have funding to you folks, but I really like to see RFPs for any projects that you have control over. And I would encourage, again, if you have any input for a permit for Caltrans, I don't know whether you have the authority to request that they put out RFPs and answer the questions regarding certified pay. I know that John Shelter used to do that work, and then for some reason he didn't, and I always supported that because he was taking a lot of the homeless people, giving them jobs, giving them an opportunity to get unhomeless. And so if you ever have a chance to have like John Shelter's projects or something over preferential, I don't know if you can do that or not, probably not, but that's just my input as far as the people that should be benefiting from some of this, rather than maybe some really large concerns, especially from coming from out of the area if they are, and doing this removal. So thank you for the opportunity to speak on this topic.
Thank you. Do we have any more comments from the public? Okay, bringing it back up to the board. Adam, would you like to address any of the public comments?
I'm not sure exactly what to address. I guess I will just provide one insight on how this works. That maybe it kind of knowing this overarches a lot of the comments, is that within the coastal development permit and the Spartina EIR, there are many have to be followed by each. That is those conditions of mitigation measures to be adequate to make plans. And those conditions relate to all sorts of stuff, like minimization measures to reduce erosion, precautions around herbicide use, cases where herbicide use can't be done, and mitigation measures to reduce potential impacts from that. There's just a slew of different conditions and mitigation measures designed to minimize environmental effects of the program. Yeah, and I mean, I'm happy to address anything else specific that the board would like me to.
I guess I just have one question, not wanting to make this go too long, but just wondering about the process of using dredge sediment to cover cut areas, and I know that's not in our permit now. Is there a chance that we might end up amending that sometime down the road?
Yeah, absolutely. Or just permitting that, as a separate activity. I'm not sure if we would amend that into the Spartina permit separately, but absolutely, it's something we're looking at. It's something that's looked at in the program EIR. I'll be finalizing soon for beneficial uses of sediments. That's one of the activities looked at in that. So we're already starting down the path in terms of allowing that under CEQA, if you will, or documenting it under CEQA. And then the next stage would be permitting it. It's a good idea. It wasn't, for some reason, when we wrote the permits originally and wrote the EIR for the Spartina, this wasn't one of the ideas then.
All right, anything else from the board before we bring it to a vote?
Does this evening's action say that we are also abdicating our responsibility to reconsider this next year? Or is that a separate question? Because I think we should bring it up again next year.
It looks to me like it's in the agenda as all one item, and that's an issue I have too, is that I kind of like the idea to force us as a board to talk about this every year. It just keeps it up in the presence of the public eye and the board or commissioners' eyes too of what's going on.
I think I seconded this, and I'd like to see an amendment to the motion that does not include us deferring to Larry next year. Larry Ockford, that is. Did I make a motion or did I second?
You would withdraw your second, and then we'll see if there's a second to the original motion, or if the original person who moved, I think was Greg, wants to amend his motion.
I would be happy to amend my motion to remove the part about the executive director authorizing.
The motion was made by Commissioner Marks.
Oh, good. Then I'll have to.
My apologies.
Thank you. Have I said before that I really don't like the Spartina
Yes,
conversations, because I've never heard a positive one in over a decade that I have been on this commission. It always turns into something like this. And I'm like, really? Do we really need to go drill down that deep? My motion stands. If anybody wants to make another motion, we can go ahead. But I really hate to beleaguer a situation like this.
So I guess we first have to see if there's a second to the original motion now.
I will second. I will.
Yeah,
second
I would stay with him too. Let's do it.
Yeah. If we have a desire, if we have a desire to pull this again, there's no problem. If the public comes to us or we have an issue with this permit, we can always take it up again. But it's not something that we need to see every year.
Okay. And just for procedural, I guess that's still then Richard's original motion, Patrick's original second, since he's not withdrawing his second. So can we have a vote, please?
Commissioner Marks,
Yes.
Commissioner Higgins,
Yes.
Commissioner Dale,
Yes. Yes.
Commissioner Doss,
No.
and Commissioner Coleman.
Yes. Okay, moving on to item 12B, award of contract to Tenera Environmental Consulting to develop an impact assessment model for Baywater intakes proposed by the district.
Thank you. I'll have a presentation on this one as well. I also want to thank Mr. John Steinbeck, who's been attending the meeting for the last 2 hours. He's with Tenera Environmental Consulting, and he's here to answer any questions if any come up. We've talked about this at some previous meetings. As the board is aware, There's some demand. There's demand from existing district tenants and future district tenants to use bay water for aquaculture activities and potentially other activities too on this Samoa Peninsula. To support that, sort of similar to the pre-permitting project, the district.
Adam, you keep
Red
in and out. Your connection seems to be dropping. Maybe if you stop your video, that might help.
Okay, yeah, let me stop sharing.
You can keep sharing, but stop your video of yourself.
Yeah, let me try that. Let me know if it's any better or if it's a huge problem. I have a little trick. I could try something different with my connection here. Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
You can hear me? It's better? Okay. So continuing on, I'll quickly summarize in case you couldn't hear me before. You know, we're working on permitting water tanks for existing and future tenants on the Samoa Peninsula. 2,750 gallons per minute at Red Tank Dock and 5,500 gallons per minute at Redwood Terminal. We've worked a lot on the design of those intakes. They would have screens that would greatly reduce any potential for entrainment or impingement of larger rooms. However, we really can't get the screen mesh down to a size to avoid entrainment of larva fish species. I've been working with the regulatory agencies to figure out how we're going to get through this permitting process. One thing that is going to be required, we're certain, is a study to determine what type and how much biomass of small organisms, larval fish species, could be entrained by the water intakes. There could be a couple steps required for this analysis, but this first step would be modeling, and then the next step, if needed, would be gathering field data regarding the larva species. So right now, what we're looking at is contracting to do modeling. So this is to develop an impact assessment model of what types and biomass of organisms would be entrained by the intakes. Tenera Consulting has submitted at our request a proposal and draft contract for them to do the work. I've had numerous discussions with John. Again, he's on the line here from Tenera, and I'm confident that Tenera is just uniquely qualified for this. It's a professional services contract that could be sole sourced. They've done just a ton of work on this. When I'm talking to the regulatory agencies, the agencies don't recommend consultants, but I can tell you that Tenera comes up because of the studies they've done. They're respected in the field, and I think they do a very good job on this. The amount for the model is $34,000. The cost would be passed on to water users. And that's the end of my presentation. The staff recommends awarding the contract to Tenera Environmental Consulting to develop an impact assessment model for bay water intakes that are proposed by the district for a cost not to exceed $34,000. I'm happy to answer any questions. And again, John's on the line too, if you have questions for him.
I'll first make a motion to award the contract to Tenera Environmental Consulting to develop an impact assessment model for bay water intakes proposed by the district for a cost not to exceed $34,000. There's your motion, Adam.
There a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and second. Any questions or discussion from the board?
I think we're going to learn a lot from this, and it'll have benefit in terms of understanding the bay and other permits going forward.
Longfin smelt, any kind of suction that's happening in the bay and entrainment of any kind of animal is going to be identified with this work.
Does this cover any location or are they set locations of suction? Good question.
In this case, it's two locations that we're looking at, Red Tank Dock and Redwood Terminal 2.
Would it be demersal or just surface water?
It's just bay.
On the top, on the surface?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, 12, 15 feet down.
No?
Can this study be pinpointed to also help, or is it redundant to help our other intake position on the, let's see, Terminal 2 dock for the bay intake, the current bay intake we have?
I'm not sure what you're referring to. This we have
like, for instance,
there's
for
existing
Nordic intake. The future Nordic intake, or the existing intake that we have.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
So is this an addition to that?
No, it's not in addition to it. So there's two. There was historically a water tank intake at both Red Tank Dock and Redwood Terminal 2. There's still structures there that we refer to as sea chests. This project would utilize those existing sea chests and upgrade them to today's standards with to protection of aquatic species. And as noted, this water would be used by existing and future district tenants, and this study and the permitting would be paid for largely by those entities. Is certainly one of those entities.
So that sea chest thing keeps coming up. Didn't we construct a sea chest, and then the holes on the sea chest that we constructed got pushed back or something? Is this in relation to that?
No, we never constructed a sea chest. Again, there was sea chests on both of the docks that were used by the mills, and this involves again upgrading those with modern screening techniques that protect organisms and permitting them for at these levels.
Okay, is this study going to the gallons per minute that are described on our agenda? Is that an adequate level? Is that more than what the future tenants may use? Can we make sure we're going to study adequate volumes for growth?
Yeah, we think it's adequate for projected needs out there.
Okay, do we have a buffer to this, or is this what we think they're going to use?
There's a buffer.
Okay. Okay.
And there's a buffer, and then also, we're constrained by how much we want to get permits for. There is going to have to be mitigation for the withdrawal, and then there's also design constraints. So to start exceeding these volumes, the construction would get more complicated than it is now. This is basically the maximum volume we can get out of using the existing infrastructure, the existing sea chests.
Okay.
Yeah, could I just add something onto that? Is that currently Taylor, they have permits that they can draw about 370,000 gallons per minute. Or per day, I'm sorry, 370,000 gallons per day. And then Coast Seafood has permits on the other side of the dock that they already have that at full build out, they could draw approximately 1 million gallons a day. And so the 12 million gallons a day that we're assessing right now is already in addition to those drawdowns that take place on those, right? And so there's about, we haven't allocated based upon other users, but with the current users, there's over 1 million gallons a day at least that is surplus over what the current users have. And, that's a pretty large user that would take, the 1 million gallons.
Just out of curiosity, 1 million gallons at 5,500 gallons per minute. We're talking about that's a maximum then, right? So maybe they are going to bring in 1,000 gallons a minute, something like that, or maybe less.
Oh, it depends on the user. Nordic could use well over 5,000. I think the Nordic lease allows them up to 7,000 gallons per minute.
Okay.
Yeah.
Commissioner Higgins would like to invite Mr. Steinbeck if there's anything he would like to contribute to discussion, since we have the benefit of an expert at our meeting this evening.
Hi, this is John Steinbeck with Tenera. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Some of the questions about the volumes and, once this model's constructed, and even after you collect the biological data, if it moves to that phase, the model is fairly adaptable. So you can, if you need to scale up or scale down, that can be done fairly easily without a lot of additional calculations or costs. And so kind of once you have some of these fundamentals put together, it makes things a lot easier. The thing that would throw a wrench into that would be like if you're, say, moving to a totally different part of the bay where the species and the hydrodynamics are really different. But along that area you're talking about now, there's probably a fairly wide latitude in, how you could apply these numbers along that area for any future development along that, I guess, call it the Samoa Peninsula. Yeah. So this is, as Adam said, this is kind of the first step, but it does provide a kind of a base to build on for future studies or future expansion for other projects in that area.
Thanks very much.
Okay, if there's nothing else from the board, I'll bring it to the public for comments or questions.
Yes, Scott Frazier.
Go ahead, Scott.
This is a very interesting project, and as Adam has pointed out, and Mr. Steinbeck just commented, you're going to get information on biological resources that you'll need for future permitting. As I read the proposed study outline, it looked like a very good organizational method, but there's one thing I would suggest you try to get incorporated in this proposal, because you have a well-qualified contractor to suggest potential avoidance and minimization methods. So as they're looking at which biological resources may be impacted, they could provide you, again, at least some tentative or initial ideas on how to minimize take, which will be important for your permitting.
Thank you. Any other additional comments from the public? Hearing none, I'll bring it back up to the board. I guess I can ask if that's at all part of the scope of work of this contractor, not to actually look at mitigation or avoidance methods, or if it's just the first step to see what's there.
Well, the first step is really to just get an idea of what the impacts potentially would be, and then we have there's existing data we can use to get an idea of what species are there, but the actual numbers and the specific composition of the fish larvae in that area would need to be done with some additional sampling, but I've actually, the minimization and screen design and things like that, we've done work on that, but that wasn't part of this proposal.
Okay, thank you. Anything else from the board before we bring it to a vote? Okay, could you call the vote, Larry?
Commissioner Higgins,
Yes.
Commissioner Dale,
Yes.
Commissioner Marks,
Yes.
Commissioner Doss,
Yes.
and President Coleman.
Yes. This next item, C, receive a report on historic shipping volumes from Humboldt Bay. I believe we're going to table that one, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and so item D, review of the report to the legislature 2020 regarding the assessment of the North Coast Railroad Authority and viability of a Great Redwood Trail.
Yes, basically this report was put out, for the legislature dealing with the Railroad Authority. I felt like it was important for the board and the public to be aware of this study and to take a look at it. They looked into, it's a pretty good analysis from my perspective for somebody that doesn't know that much about the details of the North Coast Railroad, of the, what the financing are, and then what the different governance organizations might be. And then looking at a couple of different scenarios of who could be the potential owner. If the right-of-way was dissolved, who would take it over? And so a number of these questions were put forth and kind of did some preliminary analysis. And so I wanted to bring this up initially to the board as kind of an initial step to take a look at this and not say that we have all the answers. Kind of, I think the core question for the board is, do we want to take a close look at this and then provide some sort of a written recommendation back to the authors of the study on what our recommendations might be for this. Just a couple of things that we've talked about before is there are a couple of segments of the railroad that may have more priority than others of those. We have talked about, the segment basically from the Samoa Bridge that goes through the Samoa Peninsula as being important to, maintain the potential short track, at the very least, to maintain the short track through the coastal dependent industrial properties on the Samoa Peninsula. There's also been a great deal of discussion with developers of the segment between the Eel and the Van Duzen and the Fields Landing property as being potential valuable for another sort of short track and what would be the commodities that might be used in the future. And so it really is, I'm posing this question to the board and the community is, does the board feel like we should appoint a subcommittee or take a closer look at this and then draft some sort of response on this? Or do we just want to accept the reports and then table it? And so I'm just posing this question initially to the board to see what your thoughts are.
Thank you. And I'm going to just go ahead and propose, just looking at the really late hour, that, this is a really good and dense report. Maybe the board would like to take a look at it and we could bring this back to another agenda and have a more in-depth discussion. If the rest of the board agrees, we could have some conversation on it now, but I'd like to avoid getting into it could be a topic that we could spend a whole half day on right now. And so I'd like to just take the report and then bring it back for another agenda, maybe for further review. But how does everyone else feel about that?
Yeah, let's put it on January's agenda.
I'd like to hear Richard's view on it in January, and maybe he could do it in prose, or, he could do it in a poem or something, sing a little interpretive dance.
Or you want me to write a song for it, maybe with my guitar? I can do
Yeah,
that.
no, that'd be great.
That would be preferable.
There's a lot of things that are moving quickly, and I do have a North Coast Rail Authority meeting next week. So I think it'd be appropriate if we did maybe table this discussion until January and have a full blend agenda item on it, and talk about what our options may be, for around Humboldt Bay at least.
I'll second that.
Okay, but I would recommend that in preparation for that, for everybody to take a closer look at this report. And since it is an item on the agenda, I'll put it to the public with the notion that we'll be bringing this back in January.
Stephen, am I unmuted? Ken Sawatsky?
You are.
So I probably won't be here in January. If I'm lucky, I'll probably be down in Quino, Mexico, far away from you guys in the sunshine. But I did wish to make a comment. I think the infrastructure should be preserved as much as you can around the bay. It was mentioned to me by Jack Kreider and had some really good ideas as far as using that in certain areas, not the whole thing, but certain areas to move your sediment material. And I could see how that could be really beneficial, low cost way to get it from point to point. Maybe even on the south end of Eureka, there's certain areas that are hard to get to, but you happen to have that structure there. So I do recommend that you at least consider preserving that for interest. And I think even Larry Otker mentioned going around certain sections of the bay, possibly as far as moving things, should we have those offshore windmill projects. I just would hate to see that infrastructure go away and then all of a sudden you go, oh, damn, we kind of need it now. So I'm hoping you guys will have some input on certain sections of that are beneficial to the Harbor District. So that's my input on that at this time. Oh, I don't think the Great Redwood Trail is ever going to happen. I think Bosco's going to get paid off down south, and I think we've kind of been have a bait and switch in that. But that's just my opinion regarding that particular Great Redwood Trail. So thanks for the opportunity to speak. And it does start in Blue Lake, right in the center of the universe. So take care.
Yeah, but one of your properties there, isn't it?
One more. Can I make a comment? Can you?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. This is Uri. Yeah, Larry, thank you for bringing this forward. I realize this is going to need a lot of discussion, but I think, the support for the rail width trail around the bay is certainly there. Your discussion about bringing it further down towards Fields Landing and all that is also kind of interesting, but the preferred recommendation, if you look on page 60, is to maintain the rail width trail around the bay. And I think for all the reasons that's specified there, even more, I'm sure that the community could come up with. So yeah, I look forward to this discussion. Yeah, the $5 billion seems like a big gulp, but I think it is important for the public, the general public, to realize that taking up the tracks and mitigating and for all of that disturbance would be extremely expensive. So we may be better off keeping the rail down and making use of that in some way or another. Short line rails are very important. And even though it wouldn't necessarily be connected to the National Rail Service, it is connected to a port, and it's a valuable commodity we should not ignore. Thanks very much. I look forward to further discussion.
Thank you.
Chairman Coleman.
Yes.
Could I reply to that commenter?
Sure. Let's. I just want to check to make sure, see if there's any other comments from the public.
I wanted to make a comment to Uri.
Go ahead. You can. Now we're back to the board.
Yeah, Uri, how many of the pedal rail bikes are there in Fort Bragg, and how far do they go?
Well, they just expanded. They took another batch of them down to Sacramento. I'm not positive. I think they got up to 15 in Fort Bragg. I'm not positive. Another operation just got started in Carson City and Las Vegas. I mean, these things are really a happening thing. We're putting batteries, electric motors on them to increase the range. I mean, it's really very conceivable to be able to take these, you know, on really almost all the way around the bay if the tracks were available for that. So there's really extreme potential here, but that's just rail bikes. There's trolleys, there's excursions, you know, there's all sorts of other options that could make use of those tracks besides freight, a little bit of freight too, maybe.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone. So there's no action on this item, right? So we can move on to item E, consider adopting resolution 2020-17, a resolution authorizing adoption of the Humboldt County Operational Area Hazard Mitigation Plan 2020 update.
We recommend that you adopt this. By adopting this resolution, it basically makes us eligible for funding. Excuse me, makes us eligible for funding for FEMA.
Being eligible for funding is a good thing. Any
So
discussion?
move.
We have a motion.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Anything from the public on this item? All right, bringing it back up to the board. Can you call a vote, Larry?
Yes, Commissioner Higgins,
Yes.
Commissioner Marks,
Yes.
Commissioner Dale,
Yes.
Commissioner Doss,
Yes.
and President Coleman.
Yes. Our next item is review of subcommittees. I wonder if we want to do this along with our election of officers in January.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring it to your attention so you could at least see you there. But yeah, I agree. Let's do this next meeting.
With that,
Committees really should have very clear objectives, and if we have ones that are still like open, then we should kind of formally disband them. And because we should be nimble in that regard and not just kind of formulaic.
so is the request to ban any of the subcommittees that has Pat on there? What?
No, I heard it was to put you on all of the subcommittees, Richard.
Wouldn't be a member of any subcommittee that would have me as a member.
I would have a request that Commissioner Doss would look into the Association of California Water Agencies to see whether he would be interested before our next meeting to participate on that committee.
You gave me a month to think about it.
I'll nominate.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'll nominate Commissioner Doss for the Water Committee.
I think Commissioner Dale is looking like he might be closer to that. This is something to think about. There's no action required.
No, there's no.
Yeah, I didn't want to throw it on you next week or next month without asking you. So I just threw that out there.
No action required. Okay.
Well, maybe by next month, if we pass an ordinance, we can get rid of the billboard subcommittee.
There we go.
There you go.
At least one less, fewer or less, whichever. All right. Sorry, future agenda items. There's a few listed here.
Yeah, we have the, what is it? The suction dredging, longfin smelt, the bar pilot recruitment, the personnel policy revision, and Brown Act training.
All right. Anybody want to add anything to that list? And there's a couple things, I guess, then that we are pulling over the
Most of the subcommittees and the ordinance, as well as the railroad. Can't hear you.
oh, sorry, we have the harbor report as well.
Yeah, the shipping.
Yes, the shipping.
The shipping report.
Tonnage.
All right.
Back to 2000.
So next time we meet will be a new year. Have a safe, healthy, and productive holiday. And good night. We're adjourned.
Right.
Stay safe, everyone.
Merry Christmas, and please think of those less fortunate than ourselves.
Supposed to be no. All right, good night.